Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Frontierland with me, Dean Allen. I hope you're well. It's been a while since we've spoken. It's lovely to bring you another episode of this series, which I really enjoy doing. It's all about bringing the positive stories and bringing really interesting people to your attention. And tonight we've got a really interesting guest, somebody who's probably swapped places with me. I'm a Brit who lives in South Africa. He's a South African that lives in London. So we're going to bring on Paul Gardiner as we go on. But since we've last spoken, some of you have probably been following my Frontierland podcast, which we do on Algoa FM. So if you don't, please tune into that. I've interviewed some really interesting people over the last few episodes, including an Olympic athlete who actually featured for South Africa in the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. So please check that out. In fact, tonight, my guest was one of the earlier guests on my podcast. So what we often do is we follow up with the podcast on what we do here on Frontierland. So listen, there's some wonderful things happening here in Nelson Mandela Bay. And I just want to alert you to a magnificent thing that's happening on the 2nd of September in the wonderful district of Richmond Hill here in the city, which had some bad news recently. And it's time to turn the tide to bring some positive news to Nelson Mandela Bay. We've got the Street Music Festival that's happening there on the 2nd of September. So please come out, support that, and let's show everybody what we can do here in the Bay. But with all that behind us, we're now going to go forward and speak to a wonderful guest tonight, Mr. Paul Gardiner. So I'm going to bring him on. Thank you.
Ooh, welcome to the show. Now it's your time to shine. We're gonna have a lekker chat tonight. Another good time.
Oh, welcome back home.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It's good to be back, is it?
Yeah, celebrating in style.
No, you've got to have the national drink, of course. As I said in the intro, we kind of swap places. I'm a Brit that's made South Africa my home, and you've been living in the UK now for how long?
21 years.
Wow.
Wow. Can you hear my accent?
No,
it's about as bad as yours.
I tell you what, it's never gonna. We're never
gonna swap accents.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So we all know the Gardiner name. We'll talk a lot about obviously your father and your background. But what is it like living abroad and coming back as often as you do? Do you get to? I mean, do you get to come home often?
I do, and I travel with my wife, Abby, and our little one, Rosie, and we love coming home, obviously, to Port Elizabeth. You know, I was born here, as was my brother and sister. So it's awesome to come back to Port Elizabeth because, you know, from the madness of London and just England in general, you would know, it's just so congested, that little island. And you come here, we were lucky enough to drive down the garden route while we've been here. And it's just the wide open spaces and and just virtually no traffic. What a pleasure. And Port Elizabeth, as you know, everything's 5 minutes away.
It's amazing.
So it's almost kind of a detox for us when we come out here, although I'm under the cosh because head office is here. Yeah. So Dad cracks the whip.
Gets you back. But it's funny, there's one of those things. I mean, obviously the obvious difference would be the weather. I know I need sunshine, but it's the space, isn't it, we have here in South Africa? It's something we probably take for granted. I know when I go back to the UK, I live in probably one of the least populated parts, which is the West Country on the edge of Exmoor there. That even feels crowded. I mean, there's nearly 70 million people on that little island now. And when you go back, you realize we're all sort of competing for space. Here, we can kind of escape into our own space, albeit whatever we need. And especially here in the Eastern Cape. And isn't that the beauty?
Absolutely. I think we always refer to it as big sky country, and it is that. You look up in the UK and they're just trees and there's no real mountains and landscape where we are, certainly. Down here, you've got that big sky.
Yeah.
And obviously being in PE, you've got the ocean, which is really nice. And we spent hours there this weekend, and there's octopuses everywhere. And it's just it's such the the biodiversity down at our beachfront is still amazing. I hope we can keep it that way. It's really special.
We are so lucky. I mean, we'll talk about obviously conservation and the wildlife we've got on our doorstep here, which is quite incredible, which is something you're passionate about. But I know I follow your journey when you do come back, because you've tried to pack as much as possible in, but you've obviously got the business aspect to it coming back. And that's why I was so keen to get you on tonight, because I've tried to get you on before when you've been back. So it's worked out really well for us. But let's go back. Let's go back to growing up here in the Eastern Cape. Not many people know, but you obviously went to. You went up the road to St Andrews. That was the school that you and your brother went to. But where were you born? Give us a bit of the background to this, the Gardiner story that not many people know about.
No, so we were with all three siblings, my brother and sister and myself, were born in PE, and we grew up in Circular Drive, a lovely area, and we had a great plot of land, and the Barkins River, which is just down here,
right next
where
to
we are now. Flowed through the garden. So we spent our lives in that river. Although we never had a big farm, that was our farm in a way, and it was a really wild upbringing, just building forts in the bush there, and playing in the river, and the crabs and the tadpoles and all of that. It was a really good, healthy life. And then going to school at Sunridge Primary in that area, which was a wonderful, wonderful school. And then my brother and I were very fortunate enough to have been whisked off to boarding school at St Andrews in Grahamstown. And we were both reluctant, but you know what? It was 5 very special years. So we were very privileged to go there. My sister went to collegiate, and subsequently my wife was a collegiate girl, and my sister-in-law was a collegiate girl. So all three of them.
That seems to happen here in Quebec, doesn't it? Everybody seems to have that connection. There's that's for sure. But that's the beauty of the place, isn't it? But growing up, as you did. I mean, as you know, I'm writing your father's story, and it's funny when you were describing growing up. I mean, I'm just writing now how he grew up in obviously Northern Rhodesia and the Matterpos Hills, and having that experience of being outside. It's something that never leaves you, is it? That sort of longing to be outside. And there's something about the Eastern Cape that gives you that impetus to get outside and explore, isn't it?
It's very true. You know, now spending time in England, I'm terrible. I'm a bit of an insomniac, so I'll wake up at 1, 2 in the morning, and you can't really do it in South Africa anymore. But there in the Surrey Hills, I will strip down to my running shorts, and I'll head out into the mountains with my head torch on. And I'll disappear for an hour or two at 2 in the morning. I'm the only person there, and I definitely think that stems back to those African roots.
But it's probably the only time you can get away from people as well. I mean, so that's quite incredible. But no, I know you're a great runner, and I'm sure we'll see some footage of that as well. But so growing up with obviously your dad being this successful businessman, he was growing his empire there, and one of the things I found out in my research, it was actually the reason, one of the reasons why he looked at land to create what we know as Shamwari to this day was because you guys were studying in Grahamstown, and it was appealing for him to buy land that he could have this weekend retreat that he was closer to you.
Correct.
Amazing how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously looking far afield, and I think as any South African that's been here long enough, they want to own a little patch of Africa. And so he was looking in Zim because his roots were from there. And then he thought, he's crazy to do that. He was do it on the doorstep. And the doorstep was here, just between P and Grahamstown, as you rightly said. So, there's a story there that not many people know.
No, I mean, and for me, I've got this dilemma because everybody thinks that this, he turned up and he saw the elephants along the plain. But it was something that evolved, being the pragmatist that he is, the businessman that he is as well. The opportunity started to evolve, and as I said, he acquired land around there, and this thing grew. And only someone like your father could probably see the potential in bringing international tourism to the Eastern Cape, which we know is his legacy. The fact that Shamwari has grown, and you're still, all of you, very much involved in that.
Yeah.
So I'm really enjoying that sort of the early part of the story. Now, you're part of the early story with Shamwari, and I've got to bring it up because you've got some incredible stories. We're all used to going to a game reserve if we're lucky enough and seeing this wonderfully almost controlled environment. Yes, the animals are wild, but it feels very safe, and there's processes and procedures. But it wasn't like that in the early days of Shamwari, was it? Because I believe you were one of the first game rangers.
That is true. And myself and another chap called Harry Mullman and Carl Haller, we were all pulled out of university to go and part-time go and do our bit at Shamwari, because it started to get busier and busier. And we were called the Joke Rangers.
The Joke Rangers,
yeah.
Okay.
This is 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And of course, then there was no actual qualification you could get to become a game ranger. It was a basic sort of homegrown course that you could do. And our rangers actually taught us to be rangers, or you could go and do a PH or a professional hunter's license. And I eventually chose to do that because the joke became bigger and bigger and bigger. So I thought, Dad actually said, you got to go and do this course. So I went and did my PH. But yeah, we caused a lot of havoc out there in those early days. There was a lot of innocent fun. But one of the things we did was we had some nutty Americans come out there and they wanted to really feel Africa. And there was a vegan conference in Cape Town. And bear in mind, this is 25 years ago.
Yeah.
None of us even understood what vegans were. And these guys said, okay, we really want to feel this place. And we took them out on a safari. And my mate and I, we brought our tape deck with us with some lion noises. And after Harry hid this thing in the bush and started making these lion noises. And I said, you got to run, there's lions coming. So we were.
And then as the guy got the heart attack, you got the CPR.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine that today? Well, you had a makeshift Land Rover, didn't you? I've seen images of. I mean, the technology has moved on, but then it was kind of skinny.
No, I mean, we used to drive around in 1970 vehicles. The brakes wouldn't work. We had to. You had to make sure you had all the kit, and you check your brake fluid and your oil and the air pressure in your tires and fuel it up. There was nobody to do that for you. So you were a bush mechanic as well.
Amazing.
And those things would break down all the time.
And who were your customers? I mean, who were the initial people?
Well, it was a lot of, we had in the early days, we had lodges that were self-catering. So you'd get quite a big Port Elizabeth audience.
Okay.
And they were very supportive of us in those early days. And they helped us build the Shamwari brand. It wasn't just us that did it. And they would always encourage their international friends to go to Shamwari.
I see.
And then the Brits started coming. There's a very, obviously that rich 1820 British settler history enticed a lot of the Brits, and we got a lot of them, and then a lot of Europeans. And that remains the big market for the Eastern Cape today.
The one thing that you certainly got in common, knowing you with your father, is you're very good at marketing. And I know your dad had to create this awareness, not only of South Africa as a viable destination, given the political context of what was happening back then in the early 90s, but he also had to create this awareness that there was an alternative to the Kruger Park. It was called the Eastern Cape. And is it true that we have almost a richer heritage when it comes to an indigenous population of animals down here? So what he tended to do was look at what was here, and the idea was to bring back the original animals. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was you can imagine. I mean, I often put myself in those shoes. As you rightly said, apartheid was coming to an end. It was a hell of a dangerous time to be in this country. And on the brink of a civil war, none of us knew where and what direction could go. And their dad was studying, up on what animals existed here and what he was going to bring back at the height of this frenzy. So he did it. He just persevered, put his head down, and went for it. And that particular book that he read and studied was a book that was produced by a local lecturer at Rhodes University, and he compiled this book out of all the original manuscripts of those British settlers. So when they trekked through the Eastern Cape on those ox wagons of theirs, they'd highlight and document in their diaries exactly what they encountered. And their diaries were their Bibles. Right at the back, that's where the notes section was. Yeah. And so those were all put into this book. And Dad couldn't believe what he was reading 30 years ago, and the diversity of game that existed here 200 years prior.
We should also acknowledge some of the families that were in that valley, in that area
100%.
originally. I mean, you've got the Folds family, of course, have gone on to create Amakala, the Rushmeres. But speaking to all of them, they would acknowledge that Adrian Gardiner is the pioneer of wildlife tourism in terms of an international perspective here. And they're grateful to him and Shamwari for what it's done, because it's created a model. And now we've got, I believe, 16, 17 reserves, private reserves within the area. And you can see it's a legacy of what he saw, the potential.
Yeah, I think it was the legacy is the destination.
Yeah.
The rewilding is probably a joint effort. I mean, the Folds family were instrumental in helping us position and guide us and who these farmers were and just how to play your cards carefully, I guess, and sort of helped us navigate a lot of that. The Rashmirs they'd started rewilding, albeit in a small way. So no, there's some good families out there in that valley, the Lower Albany district, and we're just so privileged to have been a part of it and helping to revive it as a family.
It's amazing because we're really we're looking at history being created. I mean, almost going back full circle. I mean, the settlers arrived, as we know, in 1820. They changed the whole landscape in terms of commercial farming, grazing, cleared a lot of this wonderful thicket that we've got here. Now, if you go to a place like Shamwari or Founders Lodge, you look at the landscape, you can see it almost breathing again. It's almost, it is. It's going to take generations to come back, but this idea of rewilding and opening up tracts of land so animals can migrate again, 10 years ago. But now people are accepting that this is becoming more of perhaps a plan for the future.
Yeah, and an authentic wildlife destination. I think the authentism will come from the corridors. You've mentioned these paths. You know, our fathers, and I'm not talking just about my father, but all those fathers from that generation were responsible for the rewilding. I think our generation are responsible for linking up those parks and creating these corridors now. That's where it gets exciting, because what that allows is more biodiversity. You know, we tried to introduce wild dog at Shamwari all those years ago, and just one pack on 25,000 hectares. It wasn't big enough. And they'd corner the animals, they'd run the kudus into the fences, through the lodges. It was pandemonium. It was an amazing animal to have there for the year that it lasted. And then we had to get rid of the dogs. We sold them, and we had to, we now have to wait until these corridors start to open up. And we hope that happens. That's really what we've all got to push for now as this generation. To try and get those egos aside and say, right, let's start doing these corridors. And there's quite a strong movement in doing that. And I'm a firm believer that if we have 17 game reserves, why don't we register the Mandela Biosphere Reserve.com, which I've done. So don't even think about it. Okay. But that's how I see it. We should be putting money into this brand and all of us, all these reserves, and creating and almost positioning ourselves as the Sabi Sands or whatever it is of the Eastern Cape. We've got a great opportunity. I'm sure we can get access to the Mandela brand because he's from here. And we should pool our resources and really position this province as a wildlife destination. It is there. It can only get better.
The more I speak to people, the more they're accepting of that idea. To drop the fences, allow the animals to migrate across their land, for their guests to stay in their own lodges, but to experience animals moving as they would naturally. Of course, I suppose the problem comes is when the key animals that people want to see, the lion, the rhino, whatever, congregate in certain areas. That's
good. It's going to have those challenges, but better for the animals than for the people. And I think you could get that across to your guests. If they are educated and on how rewilding works and everything else, they'll buy into it. I mean, I remember at Shamwari when we started, we never had lions, and we had to put up with that for a long time. We actually had a separate enclosure, and we'd have to drive the guests in, and we had to feed those lions because there was a pocket within the reserve. Yeah. But we got away with it. They understood. They were just educated on the timeline of rewilding it. You can't just chuck everything in at once. So,
no. Yeah. And talking about education, a project that you're involved in at the moment is Nyosi a wildlife reserve, which is the closest free roaming wildlife to Quebec, Port Elizabeth. It's a fantastic project that's going on there, just under 3,000 hectares. Again, it's through education that people are aware of how special this piece of land is, because it's surrounded by urban areas, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a very unique one. I mean, I think, again, a lot of people would have said, "What the hell are you doing?" But it's not me; it's my old man again at it. He's at it again at 80 years old.
Yeah,
he's dreamt this thing up with his team. He always bring his team into this. It's not just him, but they are masterminding the first ever game reserve between two cities, which is just incredible. And who would have thought that could work? But it's starting to work. You know, we put the elephants back. We've got giraffe, buffalo. There's a great cheetah rewilding program there. And the beauty of it is it's a 30-minute drive from PE. If you're in those outer suburbs, it's a 5-minute drive away.
It's amazing.
And this is an opportunity to almost create a model for this century of how we bring wildlife and the community together, because South Africa is very different to any other parts of Africa. We fence everything off and we protect it. If you go to Tanzania and all those other places, everything's just open. There's no real fences anywhere. There are no pockets. But here we protect our little thing, and we run our businesses around that. But we forget about the community, and it's time to start looking over the fence now, because if we don't take them into consideration, it'll be the end of wildlife in South Africa, and the end of wildlife in South Africa is going to be the end of tourism.
Of course.
That says it time and time again, and you don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure that out.
It is what we've got that's unique.
Yeah.
Other places have got the beaches and the hotels, but we've got the wildlife. As you know, I was privileged enough to do some speaking on a cruise ship recently, and these people have gone around the world, and the highlight of their entire trip was seeing Africa animals in the wild.
Yeah, there you go.
And as I said, to have that opportunity to get off of a ship, for example, in Port Elizabeth Harbour, and within 30 minutes they're looking at elephant, cheetah. It's mind-blowing for them, and we tend to underestimate that. Talking about the community, we had Taryn Gilson on the last show, and of course she's the wonderful lady in charge of the CCFA, the Community Conservation Fund of Africa. And that key relationship with community, we're seeing it in Nyosi, because we have the big township, which is right on the border. It's crucial that everybody buys into this, and everybody benefits from this as well, isn't it, Paul? Yeah,
I mean, we'll do that through employment. We're going to do that through setting up a community center. There'll be training facilities. So teaching people in the art of hospitality. We're going to build a wildlife campus there for local and foreign students that are studying their BComs. They're going to have this wildlife component or semester that they go and carry out. And you'll see it's a melting pot of innovation and education and embracing community, job creation, and the rehabilitation of land and biodiversity. So it's almost a wonderful place for students to come to see how it's done and learn over this. We're not going to. There's going to be a bit of trial and error, I think, that's involved, like there was when we started Shamwari all those years ago. But one of our team came up with the word creative conservation, and I quite like that, because we're going to have to get creative. It's not a massive piece of land. There is 100,000 people that live on the northern boundary, so we're going to have to be super creative. We believe some really cool ideas, and we're open to many others. So.
It's interesting. It's a different way of looking at conservation. I know some of the feedback from the guests on that ship was, well, I didn't like it. We saw the fences, but they've got to be aware that that's how we manage a wildlife protected area. So what I like about Nyosi, the rangers will take you to the top. They will show you the aspect and explain what this place is and what it stands for, as opposed to hiding the urban area. It's part of embracing it.
No, it's actually quite interesting. You see a herd of elephants, and you got a great shot of that with the town in the background. Yeah. The only other place you see that is Nairobi National Park in Kenya. And, it's how man and nature are working together and living together, cohabiting.
No, I encourage everybody to go out if you haven't been already, and just as I say, it's a wonderful place to just go for a lunch or
a day trip,
a day trip, and check it out. And it's affordable. That's what I like about it. We've got this perception that wildlife reserves are elitist, which a lot of them are. Of course, they cater for the international market. And it was something that I was very conscious of when I came, and I was promoting a lot of the property here. But this is something I can really get behind, because you see people of all backgrounds enjoying that space of a weekend.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
And next to follow is accommodation. We've just put up several pods, and they should be open in the next month or so, and they're going to be amazing and also affordable. So yeah, Port Elizabeth, get behind this one if you would, like you did Shamwari all those years ago.
No, totally. And if, by the way, anybody watching, I'm so engrossed in this conversation. I knew we would be. Please, if you've got any questions for Paul, please shout away, and we'll ask those. But I wanted to come back to obviously growing up with your father and how he had this incredible vision and passion. When did you decide you were going to get involved, as opposed to Murray, your brother? He's also involved in travel, but he's gone and done his own thing. He's doing it. He's wonderfully successful with Gilt Edge Travel. You decided to work with your dad. That must have its challenges, but he's an inspiration every day, isn't he? Because he sets the standard.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those kids who struggled academically. I really struggled academically, and just to find my path in life came at a challenge. It's my makeup, and I'm very open about that. And so I gave London a shot in '98 with all my mates. We all used to go on that visa, 2-year work visa, they called it. And it was good fun, but after a few months there, I actually had enough, and I left all my mates. And Dad said, "Come back, let's get you stuck into the business." And I was mentored not by Dad, to a degree, Dad did obviously, but by a gentleman called Donnie Milan, the late Donnie Milan, and he was our MD. And he mentored quite a few of us, I think, unbeknown to any of us. He was just unbelievable, and. I bumped heads with him a few times. I did walk into the office one day with a blue eye, and he didn't quite like that. I got into a bar brawl, and I was the face of Shamwari.
He was quite a tough character, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a tough guy. Yeah, he was a tough guy. He didn't take any nonsense. Yeah. But he was very good and worked incredibly well with Dad. And then sadly, his life was taken at 53, I think. Yeah. And that was the end of that chapter. And we just, it was a real shock, to die so young, very suddenly. And we were all left holding the baby, and Dad had to sort of pick everybody up and rebuild. And we've never ever been able to replace that guy. You always say everybody's replaceable. Donnie wasn't. But anyway, so he taught me everything that I know about marketing, and then Dad said to me one morning, he said, "I think you need to go back to London." I really want to go back there, and I went, and within a month. I suddenly just felt it was the right place to be, and I actually really started to enjoy it because I'd only planned to go for a year.
And by then, had he started Mantis?
Yeah, Mantis. We were about 2 or 3 years into Mantis. Okay. Yeah, so I was having quite a lot of fun growing that. I was working under our marketing director at the time, and it was all good. And I lived in 3 cities. I lived in PE, Johannesburg, Cape Town. I had clothes in 3 cities. All I carried was my laptop and my golf clubs, and I just used to do the circle. For 4 years, I did that. It was a lovely life.
That's when you were a bachelor. But, but I understand going to London, you also met your wife. Now, tell me about that, because she was also involved in Shamwari. That's a lovely story I got through the interview with Abigail.
Yeah, so a few girlfriends later, I was then running our business in London, and the general manager of Shamwari, Joe, got hold of me and said, "Listen, there's a young girl here. She's really good at what she does. And she's coming over to London. She wants to take a break from the reserve. Do you think you can employ her?" So I said, "Listen, we haven't got anything available, but I'll see what I can do." And Abby and I got on the phone when she got to London. We had a quick chat, and I said, "Let's give it a few months. I'm not quite ready to bring anybody else in." And then I phoned her 3 months later because we had a position. She said, "No, she's hating London. She hates this place." And bearing in mind now, we've never really met. Yeah. And I said, "Well, just come, let's have a chat." And I picked her up from South Kensington Tube Station, and we hopped in the car together and drove out to our office, which was about an hour's drive. And when you just click, suddenly, you're living in London and it's English people everywhere. Yeah, and suddenly you're sitting next to somebody who's from the Eastern Cape.
South Africans you can let go,
and we just had this common denominator. I don't know what it was. It was just such fun. But anyway, I was dating a German girl at the time, and that carried on for another year and a half, I think. And then we got together after that relationship ended, and we got engaged about 9 months later.
Wonderful. And no, she's a lovely, lovely lady who's got so much knowledge into Shamwari, especially how it started, because she was there, independent of you.
Yes.
You know, that was.
I was in England. She was working at Shamwari. Yeah.
Yeah. So the nice thing is, I can ask her about the Gardiner family when she was inside the Gardeners and also outside the
Yeah.
garden. So it's a nice perspective.
She also knows all my dad's nonsense and his traits. So
well, of all the people that can handle Mr. Gardiner, probably Abigail's one of the up the top of the list, and people have told me that. So that's nice to know. But I want to turn back onto you now, Paul, because Adrian's 80. He won't want us to remind him of that, and we think he's going to go on forever. But what's gonna be the future for you? I mean, how do you see? I know you've got so many projects lined up, and your talents are different from your father. I mean, Adrian, he's a businessman. He runs a very, very tight ship. Pre-COVID, of course, it was a multinational enterprise in terms of hospitality, not just in game reserves, but in high-end hospitality all around the world. And that takes some doing to take that on, of course. He's partnered with Accor, so that's still part of the Mantis arrangement. COVID changed everything, didn't it? I mean, it knocked him harder than anybody. It was something he couldn't control for the first time in his life. This was something he couldn't control, as for all of us. And now we're in a rebuilding phase or a consolidation phase. He started up the CCFA and got this wonderful project, and you'll see of course, he's keeping going. He's got the wonderful property at Founders, which is based upon the land in Shamwari. So he's still got that link with Shamwari. But you've got some exciting things coming up. And I like the way that you keep your work relatively independent as well. You've got your own interest as well.
I think, moving to London, everybody says, well, how do you get on and work so well with your father? I think having that distance has helped the relationship in a way. And we've kind of got on with our own things, but there's always this commonality that we come back to when we are together. And, I slot right back into the office here and that. So that's good. But he says 80. We spent yesterday out at St. Francis, where we're doing the St. Francis Links development, and there's 34 units that we're building there, residential units. It's going to be an amazing development. But I mean, he was trudging around in that building site. It was about 14 degrees. It was peeing with rain. The dust was going everywhere, and he just soldiered on with his bad knees and climbing up ladders that most young people would be nervous to climb up. I was pretty taken aback by that.
He's an amazing man. He's a big man. I remember when I first moved here. I mean, he'd only just had those knees replaced. Yeah. And he would moan that he couldn't walk or go for his swim, for example. I said, Adrian, you've just had double, not one, 2 knee replacements. Yeah. Now he's back on his feet and he's going. And as I said, I remember, I don't know if you were there, but on his 80th in the office, he said, right, enough of that. We've got to get back to work.
No, he cracks on. And, I keep reminding him of the Clint Eastwood quote, and I'll tell him that now because he is watching. Never let the old man in.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. What Clint Eastwood always says. Whenever he gets up in the morning, just keep going.
Yeah,
so I love that.
Yeah,
but so it obviously as the son in a business, and of an entrepreneur and somebody who's been so successful, you are kind of in the shadows, and everyone's you got such big boots to fill and everything else. And I think you kind of get over that as the older you get. I've just turned 50 now, and legacy for me is to almost take what I've learned in the last 30 years from Dad and Donnie and all these characters that I've been lucky enough to have worked with, and to embrace that. And so myself and a young girl called Ashley, a Cape Town girl who also lives in the UK, have started a company called Terra Nova. And Terra Nova is all about, and you'll see a pic on the screen, I think.
We've got some images of Terra Nova.
Terra Nova is all about master planning. And so we get calls from clients, and we have over the decades, they're interested in us bringing our knowledge to them, and they want to build a lodge somewhere on the planet. And, whether it be Africa or anywhere on the planet.
This particular lodge, sorry, go back there, Gary. This particular lodge is Founders Lodge, isn't it?
That's right. That's Founders.
Beautiful Founders overlooking the valley there.
So, and I should clear that up because I've spoken a lot about Shamwari. We did sell Shamwari about 10, 15 years ago. However, we kept a little piece out, which is our family home, which is now a commercial lodge. And fortunately, we have a lovely arrangement with Shamwari where we get to traverse out into the game reserve. So Terra Nova's all about master planning, as I said, but specifically in that eco lodge space. And I'll give you some examples. So we got a really great inquiry from the King of Bahrain. And the King of Bahrain said, listen, I'm going to be fixing up our old hotel. It's been there for about 45 years. It's on an island off the coast of our country. And I want to turn this into something, but I don't just want a general brand plastered all over this thing. I want an eco brand. And he sent his team out to go and find an eco brand. And they searched far and wide and eventually stumbled across our brand, and they invited us there to go and see this place.
That's amazing.
The whole thing there is, it's not about the King's vision for that is not about just lying on the beach. It's about getting guests off their buns into vehicles to go and see the wildlife on the island and learn and get entrenched in that, and the Arabian gazelle, and there's a population of cormorants there. I think it's 300,000 strong. So much so that Attenborough's BBC team have filmed it, and Attenborough's spoken about it. And that's right there on the island. And I've been there, and it's just mind-blowing.
That's amazing.
There are dugongs. There's a population of about 500 of those that come at a certain time, and they migrate around the island. So turtles and all kinds of. So we're going to do land-based safaris. We're going to do marine safaris. And we're going to get the guests really involved. But it's going to be a beautiful jewel in our crown when that launches.
I'm looking forward to that.
And that'll be in January next year.
Talking about getting guests involved, you've got an association with a gentleman that I'm sure everybody's heard of, Mr. Bear Grylls, and here he is. Tell me how that came about, and how can we experience some of his survival techniques here in South Africa?
Yeah, Bear and I hooked up at a dinner. My wife introduced me through his cameraman. Another story. I always wanted to get to him because, he appeals to youth, and we had a big gap year program sending hundreds of kids to South Africa from England, and they would work behind the scenes on the game reserves, learning and working with a wildlife team. And I thought, wow, if I could get to Bear, imagine getting that endorsement from Bear. And I made it my mission to get to him. And everyone said, no, you'll never get to him. He's a celebrity, blah, blah, blah. When I got to him, he embraced the conversation, and together we set up a survival academy. That was born out of that one meeting.
Super.
And so we take what he does on telly and we bring it to life for kids and for corporates and for adults. And we do bespoke courses. We did a course now for a billionaire who sails around the world on his yacht. And he said he just wants to put an event together for his crew. And there were 70 crew members. So you know how big the boat was.
Wow.
And he just said, you guys have fun. And he got Bear in for the day, and Bear choppered in and rappelled out of the helicopter, and we put this amazing day together. So those sort of things keep coming. It's been an amazing 10 years of my life with Bear and working with a celebrity. He'd hate me to call him a celebrity, but he's a wonderful guy, very entrepreneurial. You can take almost any idea to him and he will run with it. One of the ideas, I went to Bear's house the one day and he said, come, we're going to have a meeting. And Shara, his wife, threw a pair of trunks at me. And so Bear said, the meeting's in the swimming pool. And we sat in that pool for about 2 hours, dreaming up ideas. And the one idea we dreamt up was an indoor Bear Grylls experience. And we persuaded a company called Merlin. Now, Merlin are number 2 to Disney in the world. So they're in the theme park attraction space. They have the Legoland franchise. In fact, Merlin is owned by the Lego family from Denmark. And they spent 23 million pounds on a Bear Grylls adventure park. And that is located in Birmingham at the NEC.
Wow.
And it's amazing. I mean, you go indoor skydiving, there's rock climbing, there's a shooting range and an axe throwing thing and escape rooms. And then you order a pizza after your long day thing, and there's grubs all over it. It's like quite way out.
It's amazing.
But it's an incredible experience. And it was so nice to be a part of that, getting Bear that big deal.
He's a fantastic personality, but it's the appeal of people going back to the basics, isn't it? Having spoken to a lot of people in the high-end tourism sector, even the wealthy want to go back and stay in tents. They want to get connected with the earth again. And I think that's where this comes from. We're so busy. We're so wrapped up in the urban environment, especially when they come here to Africa. People want to touch the earth. They want to make fire. They want to stay underneath the stars. And it's something I see that's gone the full circle again.
Definitely, yeah. I think COVID catapulted it into that space too. Under canvas is what everybody wants. You got sky beds, star beds. We've obviously done the railway carriage at Founders Lodge now, which is our take on a sky bed. But that's a lovely, authentic experience. You sleep on a railway carriage.
It's not just any railway carriage. It was the railway carriage the gardeners used to travel around South Africa.
That is correct, yeah.
Which is an amazing story in itself.
Yeah, so, innovation, and it comes back to Terra Nova, because we take these innovative ideas of star beds, of sleeping under canvas, of pods. I've invited a pod designer to Founders Lodge this weekend, and they have designed these amazing pods, which are at a place called White Desert on Antarctica, which is part of our Mantis Collection. And so we take all of that innovation and we try and present that to clients. So in Saudi, for instance, we're coming up with a beach concept for a client, a resort of 160 keys. Now, how do we do that? And so, all our travels and experiences, you've got to look after the family element. So let's do some villas. Let's do some cozy pods for the honeymooners and the newlyweds and whatever. And let's do under canvas on the beach, because we've done that before. And so you've got three amazing concepts. And then let's weave it together with a real conservation spin. So, there's all the marine life in the Red Sea, which I believe is as good as the Maldives. And there's coral reef there like you cannot believe. There's sharks, there are all kinds of things. So we then have to attach maybe an IP to that, a brand, like a Bear Grylls, but we've got somebody else in mind for that. And we'll do marine and land-based safaris again. And the guides need to be and have this incredible knowledge of the experiences there and the history of the area. And then it's the F&B and the cuisine and how we tailor that to this Arabian palate. So that's what we do in Terra Nova. Yeah. It's not just about the design. It's creating the guest experience, the activities, the interiors, the unique architecture, innovation. It's all of that. It's a melting pot of a whole lot of stuff that we have learned over the past 30 years.
And it's doing this at the frontier. It's like what Adrian did, your father did here in the late 80s. Here in the Eastern Cape, you're doing it in other parts of the world. Yeah. And it's seeing the opportunity to do that. And there's no reason why they can't do that.
No, absolutely. And Dad always says, you've got to be a plagiarist. But it's true. I wouldn't just look at Mantis. I look at everything here. I think South Africa have innovated in glamping for the last 20 years already. It's only really arrived in England during COVID.
Yeah.
I think they're missing a trick. And they're starting to do beautiful tented camps in England now. Yeah, you can imagine what's going on there. It's been exported anyway to all these parts of the world. A lot has been learned from South Africa. I've got a good friend who spent a lot of time in Africa. Amit, he's from India, and he's got jungle lodges, as they call them there, safari lodges. And he's created the most beautiful lodge. There's so many close links to Africa because he spent so much time there. So he's also been influenced by Africa.
Talking of Africa, what makes it unique again is the animals. And I know you're very, very keen. I mean, if anybody follows Paul, and I suggest you do on social media, he's very creative when it comes to that side of the medium. I mean, in terms of videos, in terms of capturing those moments. And that's the project we're going to talk about next, something called WildLens. Can we talk a little bit about that, Gary? I believe we've got some video coming up.
Clip 3, yeah.
Clip 3.
Hey, girls, come on.
How long will that take it to go down?
5.5 minutes.
Yeah. She's about 8 meters away from me through the bushes, but she's been heavily sedated.
You'll see we've trimmed the horn.
Yeah.
We're going to do another trimming now because there's such a big demand in the Far East for rhino horn.
So what would be the value of this horn?
Between 50 and 70,000 US dollars a kilogram. So it's astronomical.
Wow.
Amazing. What's happening there, Paul?
Okay, so I should go back a bit. I've always been a big fan of media, and I think today we should actually recognise the passing of Derek Watts because we're talking about media.
Yeah.
So raise a glass to him tonight. But media has always fascinated me, but I've never really been able to get into it just because of busyness of life. And if you go back 20 years ago, none of us had smartphones. So, we now all have this tool in our pockets, and it's great from that perspective. You know a little bit about editing, and you've got all the platforms now to broadcast and so on and so forth. So I sat down with a group of youngsters in London about 4 years ago. And I said, I want to get into this space. How do I do it? And then I left. I had another meeting, and they carried on. And they said, well, what are Paul's passions? He loves running and he loves conservation. So why don't we create a platform called Natural Born Runners? And so I came back from the meeting. They told me this idea, and I've kind of been fixated on that for the last 4 years. And what we did, and that particular clip you've just watched was a pilot episode that we did with, you may recognize him if you're a Discovery Channel fan, that was Ed Stafford. And Ed was one of the first people ever to traverse the whole length of the Amazon River in Brazil. So he's a legend in his own right. And he came down, and we shot a 20-minute episode of Natural Born Runners. And then, of course, a couple of weeks went by and COVID arrived. Mm-hmm. And that kind of killed the goose. So I put it on ice for a few years. But it is something I'm super passionate about. And I've actually, about 2 months ago, filmed episode 2, which is in the Highlands of Scotland. And I'll show you a very quick trailer on that in a second. But to try and launch your own channel on YouTube is not the easiest thing to do. And that was my biggest thing. If you don't have sponsorship and I don't have time to go and raise money to get sponsorship.
Or a lovely studio like this.
Yes. It's all costs a fortune.
Of course.
So how do you do it? And that's kind of beat me up because I just could never get Natural Born Runners out the starting blocks. And I spoke to a lot of different channels, and I've had people talking to Disney and Netflix and various others, and I just kind of gave up the will to continue.
Shame, because it's a great concept.
Yeah, and it was good fun. I loved it. I was in my element filming that. When you really find your thing, it was brilliant. We had the most incredible 48 hours with it. Anyway, so it never happened, but then I met a lady called Barbara Bellini, and Barbara is ex-Discovery Channel. She's ex-Channel 4 in the UK, Nat Geo, National Geographic Channel, and she's kind of semi-retired, I guess, but also very keen and very well connected in the media space. And her and I put our heads together and we thought, why don't we start our own channel? And we've come up with the name called WildLens TV. And WildLens TV is a YouTube channel, purely YouTube, nothing else for now. And what we decided to do was approach all the game ranges at Founders and at Nyosi and at other game reserves, and just to feed us with content. And we met up with a company in the UK that looks after the YouTube channels for Juventus Football Club, AC Milan. They look after Universal Music and Warner Music. So they are pretty well established. It's called Buzz My Videos. And their job is to elevate your views. And they said to me and Barbara, this is the way to do it. And they gave us the magic sauce. And so we now have adapted that approach. And we're 1 month in, and I think our videos have had about 70,000 hits, which in 1 month is quite interesting. But certainly my channel's been running for years, and I've got nowhere anything like that.
Is there an optimum time for these videos? Because we know that people are
so we're focusing on shorts,
yeah,
which are equivalent to Reels or TikTok videos, between sort of 10 seconds and 59. That's the short, and then the idea is when we build up a bigger subscription and we've got some amazing viewing figures, we're going to start launching longer form documentaries. And so Natural Born Runners would be a little series in that. Suddenly I've got a platform from which to launch Natural Born Runners.
Of course, yes.
And then
it's not wasted material.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just parking it for now. And then we're going to talk I met with Chris Fallows when I was here. He's an amazing photographer, and he was the one guy that captured all the breaching great whites.
I was going to say Fallows is
synonymous
legend.
Yeah. And so we're going to do his story, and we're going to do a Natural Born Runners together, actually.
Okay.
The lady we met last night at the forum,
yes,
Lee.
Yeah.
I chatted to her at length about Natural Born Runners at dinner. We're going to do her story.
Okay.
And so the idea is to unearth all these incredible stories, whether it be through Natural Born Runners or just stories about people doing great stuff. WildLens is not focused on Africa entirely. We want to go to Canada to capture grizzly bears and Alaska. I want to do the polar bears in Greenland and Svalbard. I want to get my friend in India to do the tigers for us. The Aussie outback, there's interesting insects and snakes and whatever out there. So Borneo, all those places. And there are so many lenses in the wild today because everybody's got a phone. And the footage that we are getting sent by so many people today is proving that.
Wow.
I mean, we've got a Google Drive with tons and tons of footage now coming into the system.
And how do you credit those people who send in the information?
We're trying to figure that out. We're doing little watermarks and on the short videos. When we start doing longer form, it's a lot easier to do that because we can say, with thanks to whoever. But rangers, we're going to pay a little bit of money to, so they're incentivized to start.
Do you encourage people to present their videos as well?
We typically don't, but I'm not. I'm quite happy with that because I think it just adds a bit of personality to it. Of course it does. Yeah. Of course it does. Right now it's just a focus on that. So
and we can
show the little trailer there of the WildLens trailer. It's very short. Okay, I wanted to just very quickly tell you about a great new initiative that we've launched called WildLens. I'm one of the founding partners in this new business. What it is a YouTube channel dedicated to wildlife, and there are so many lenses in the wild today. Everybody's out there on game drives and safaris, particularly in Africa, but not just Africa, Alaska, Canada, the outback of Australia, and they're capturing amazing footage of wildlife. So we want all of that collaboration to come to us, and we will put it up on the WildLens YouTube page, and we're going to create this community of fans of wildlife. So please join us. And eventually, when we get a nice pool of subscribers, what I want to do is select some of them, and they're going to join me in South Africa. We're going to do something incredible on our game reserve. So please, please, please encourage your friends and family to subscribe. Thank you.
That looked like you were doing that in a park in London, am I right?
Right next to the Savoy Hotel, yeah.
It had that. You're trying to make it look exotic, but I sensed it was pretty urban.
I'm afraid it was London.
Well, you came across very enthusiastic, and you're imagining the outback.
You can hear a siren in the background, at least.
It was quite good.
That was cut number 50, or take number 50.
But talking about Britain, I've met this man. There's a guy called Paul Lister who's considered a maverick there, but I absolutely love his passion. He was inspired by your dad when he came down here, and he's trying to rewild the Highlands of Scotland, or certainly an area of the Highlands of Scotland. And he's butting heads. People cannot see his vision. But as he said, certainly in the United Kingdom, with its lack of space, there is such a need for land to go back to its wild state, which can also generate tourism. It can generate food. It can generate sustainable farming as well. And that's someone that I know we both enjoy because Paul speaks with this passion. How you were up there recently? How is he doing?
Paul's good. I actually spoke to him on Sunday. He phoned me out the blue. He is an incredible character. He bought this little block of land, and it's not so little. It's 10,000 hectares in the Highlands of Scotland. And 20 years ago he did that. And he had a vision to rewild. So much like Dad did 20 years or 10 years prior to that, there was Paul doing the same thing, which is pretty phenomenal. Because, there's at least Dad understood Africa, and, there were animals everywhere, albeit not down in the Eastern Cape, but he could get access to them. There, it's Great Britain, as you know. The only thing that really exists there are the squirrels and the
odd fox.
The odd fox and, sure, lots of deer.
Yeah.
So he has a vision to bring back the bears and the wolves to the Highlands of Scotland. They existed there 500 years ago.
Indigenous.
Yeah. And so, as an Englishman in Scotland, it's not easy. But what's happening is rewilding is becoming far more acceptable across the UK. And there's some great examples that are popping up. Landowners that have reverted and turned the clock back. And it's incredible to see how that English countryside has transformed itself. Scotland is often referred to as a green desert. There is very little left, although you might not think that. But if you didn't know, there were forests everywhere there, and then you'd have these apex predators and all kinds of interesting animals, all gone.
We tend to think of Scotland with the rolling sort of hills and that. But I remember in Paul's interview with me, he pointed out, as a historian, the Romans built a wall because there was a mass forest and they couldn't penetrate there. There was, they couldn't take over the locals there because of the trees and the wildness of the area. So we've even changed that landscape as well, haven't we?
Yeah. So if you watch Braveheart,
Yeah.
And then he scaled some of those big mountains. Those would have been forests.
Yeah.
They're all just bare now. So even in the movie,
Yeah.
it showcases that bareness. But yeah, so Paul's on a mission, and anything we can do to help, we do. And so just coming back to Natural Born Runners, as I said, I was up and I shot a new episode, and it is shot on Allerdale. It's 20 minutes long, and it's been edited. It's just got a bit of polishing to do. I think we've got to edit out a few swear words. Unfortunately, one escaped my editing. It is in this trailer.
Just close your ears, everybody.
It'll give you a little taste.
Thank you.
It is one of the most unbiodiverse places on the planet, believe it or not. And although it looks green, they call it a desert. They call it a green desert. Africa, we've got the big five: the lion, the leopard, the elephant, buffalo, and the rhino. Here, you've got potential to bring back the wolf, the bear, the lynx, the moose, the bison. And fuck it, man.
That's lovely. The cow saved your blushes. I never heard what you said. You looked like you had some strapping on your ankle there. Were you struggling with an injury?
Yeah, I know. My ankles go over bloody. They're terrible. So I've got to be careful.
No, but that's the kind of footage people like. Sometimes we're so used to this sanitized, everything's perfect. It's nice to see somebody out there doing something they love, making mistakes, falling over, and that's the beauty.
I'm very lucky. I've got a great editor, and he's young. He's a lot younger than I am, and he sits there drinking while I'm running and scaling these mountains, and it's all built into the video. It's very cleverly done, and he's a brilliant filmmaker and editor. Christian is his name. So we have a lot of fun. We're quite a good little team together.
So people watching this, not necessarily just live, but people following up on this, which a lot of people do, or where can they follow this journey? Where can they get involved early? Because I can see this growing and getting bigger and bigger.
So the best thing you can do right now is subscribe to WildLens TV on YouTube. And there is another WildLens. It's some bikers in India. So look for our WildLens. If you put that last slide on, you'll see our logo. So yeah, join us for the journey. I really hope we turn it into something. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. We're going to give it a good crack.
And there's the dung beetle, of course, synonymous with a healthy planet and a healthy Africa that we know as well. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Paul. I'm so glad we could grab you while you're home from Mud Island for a few
thanks,
for a few weeks, and I know it won't be long before you come back.
And thank you to your listeners as well. I really appreciate it, and good to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode of Frontierland. Thank you.